Do you ever wonder how energy flows through our ecosystem?
Isn't it amazing how microbial decomposers transform organic matter into a mineral form? And the incredible ability of these plants could again use this for uptake and incorporation into new tissues. So this is called nutrient cycling.
In today's episode, we are going to share to you the wonders of nutrient cycling and decomposition.
The most essential nutrients within the ecosystem are recycled. Let's follow the story of the element nitrogen. As plants take up nutrients like nitrogen found in the soil solution through their roots, they become incorporated into living plant tissues as organic matter. As the plant tissue senesce, the dead organic matter then returns to the soil or sediment surface. This process in plants is called retranslocation or resorption. Various decomposers transform the organic nutrients into a mineral form through the process of mineralization, and they are now once again available for uptake by plants. This process is called internal cycling. The key process in recycling of nutrients is decomposition. It is the breakdown of chemical bonds formed during the construction of plant and animal tissues. Decomposition involves an array of processes including leaching, fragmentation, digestion, and excretion. An essential function of decomposers is the release of organically compound nutrients into an inorganic form. The wide variety of organisms involved in decomposition is classified into groups according to both their function and size. So first is the group called microflora. They are less than 100 micrometer in size. So they comprise of the bacteria and the fungi, which are most commonly associated with decomposition. Bacteria can be further grouped into aerobic and anaerobic based on the requirement of oxygen to carry out respiration. The second group is called mesofauna. Its size ranges from 100 micrometer to 2 millimeters, which includes mites, potworms, and springtails. The third group is called macrofauna. The size ranges from 2 to 20 millimeters, which then includes the millipedes. Lastly is the megafauna, so its size is greater than 20 millimeters. This group is dominated by earthworms and snails. Also, there are what you call as microbivores, which feeds on bacteria and fungi. Ecologists study the process of decomposition by designing experiments that follow the decay of dead plant and animal tissues through time by using litter bags. Litter bags function by placing a fixed amount of dead organic matter in mesh bags. So through time, the rate of loss is measured within these mesh bags.
It is very crucial for our ecosystem to keep the flow of nutrients available in the environment. Inorganic matters such as water, carbon dioxide, and other nutrients are basic necessities for all living things to live and serve their function. Microbial decomposers use carbon compounds found in dead organic matter as a source of energy. These inorganic matters are products of decomposers like fungi and bacteria through decomposition. Decomposition is an essential ecological process happening in an ecosystem, influencing the degradation of complex organic substances into smaller compounds. In order to attain a good decaying material, an efficient decomposition should be involved. An efficient decomposition depends on the maintaining microbial activity in a compost. Several factors like aeration or oxygen, moisture, and temperature can make a huge difference on the rate of decomposition. Oxygen is required for microbes to decompose organic wastes efficiently. Some decomposition occurs in the absence of oxygen or what we call the anaerobic conditions. However, the process is slow and foul odors may develop. Another factor is moisture. Adequate moisture is essential for microbial activity. Dry compost will not decompose efficiently. Proper moisture encourages the growth of microorganisms that break down the organic matter into humus. The last one is temperature. Temperature of the compost pile is very important to the biological activity taking place. Low external temperature slows down microbial activity while warmer temperatures speed up decomposition. All these factors influence the decomposer activity, resulting to geographic variations in rates of decomposition that relate directly to climate. Anorganic matter is basically decayed plant or animal material that can be found in the soil. As these materials break down, they undergo the process called mineralization. Mineralization is the conversion of organic carbon and other nutrients into inorganic forms or into smaller, simpler, and soluble organic compounds. In other words, mineralization is the replacement of the organic parts of organism by minerals. The nutrient is released and is available for uptake by new plants. Nutrients produced from mineralization can be reused by the same organisms, incorporating the inorganic nutrients into an organic form in a process known as the nutrient immobilization. Immobilization is the reverse process of mineralization, wherein nutrients are converted from the inorganic to organic forms, making them unavailable to plants. If a particular nutrient is limiting to microbial metabolism, nutrients from mineralization or nutrients from the soil will be taken up and retained by the microbial biomass, rendering these nutrients unavailable for plant uptake. The rates of mineralization and immobilization while undergoing decomposition are associated to the nutrient content of the dead organic matter being consumed. As decomposition continues, the debris from the preceding processes now degrades into a dark brown or black homogeneous organic matter known as humus. After the microorganisms have broken down organic matter into smaller compounds and there's nothing to break down anymore, that's the time when the material becomes humus and it will be now in the resistant state of decomposition. Humus is a biologically active carbon chain that is stable in the soil. It's a reservoir of nutrients, a buffering agent, supports biological activity, holds moisture, helps loosen the soil, and improves drainage. They buffer toxins and hold them so that it will not be available to plants for uptake. Once humus is ingrained into the soil matrix, it is now referred to as a soil organic matter.
The rhizosphere is an active zone of root growth and death, characterized by intense microbial and fungal activity. Decomposition in the rhizosphere is more rapid than in the bulk soil because plant roots use carbon-rich exudates to supplement the decomposition process of low carbon quality organic matter. Nutrients immobilized in bacteria biomass are then released to the soil as microbivores, such as protozoa and nematodes that feed on the bacteria. Populations of protozoa and nematodes fluctuate. As populations decline, their readily decomposable tissues also enter the detrital food chain. Protozoan biomass can equal that of all other soil animal groups except for earthworms. As much as 70% and 15% of soil respiration can be due to protozoa and nematodes, respectively. Production rates of microbivores can reach 10 to 12 times their standing biomass with a minimum generation time of 2 to 4 hours, suggesting a significant effect on nutrient mineralization within the soil. Some estimates conclude that at the global scale, rhizosphere processes utilize approximately 50% of the energy fixed by photosynthesis in terrestrial ecosystems, contribute roughly 50% of the total carbon dioxide emitted from terrestrial ecosystems, and mediate virtually all aspects of nutrient cycling. Decomposition in an aquatic ecosystem varies as a function of water depth and flow rate. In flowing waters such as streams and rivers, various specialized detritivores are involved in the breakdown of plant litter imported from adjacent terrestrial ecosystems. In open water environments, dead organisms and other organic matter, called particulate organic matter, drift downward to the bottom. On its way, the particulate organic matter is constantly being ingested, digested, and mineralized until much of the organic matter is in the form of humic compounds by the time it reaches the bottom sediments. Bacteria decompose organic matter on the bottom sediments, using aerobic or anaerobic respiration depending on the supply of oxygen. Dissolved organic matter in the water column also provides a source of carbon for decomposers.
Internal cycling of nutrients depends on the processes of primary production and decomposition. Primary productivity determines the rate of nutrient transfer from inorganic to organic form. Meanwhile, decomposition determines the rate of the transformation of organic nutrients into inorganic form. The rates at which these two occur directly influence the rates at which nutrients cycle throughout the ecosystem. And through their interdependence, they are able to interact to limit the rate of internal cycling of nutrients. In this process of internal cycling, there is said to be a feedback system wherein reduction lowers the total amount of nutrients returned to soil and dead organic matter. Reduced quantity and quality of organic matter entering the decomposer food chain increases immobilization and reduces the availability of nutrient for uptake. In turn, associated high quantity and quality of dead organic matter encourages high rate of net mineralization and nutrient supply. The nature of the link of nutrient cycling varies among ecosystems, but virtually in all ecosystems, there is a vertical separation between the zones of production and decomposition. In terrestrial ecosystems, plants act to bridge this physical separation. Meanwhile, in aquatic ecosystems, plants do not always function to bridge the two zones. Specifically, in aquatic ecosystems, this physical separation is said to be a major factor controlling productivity of open water ecosystems. To further understand how nutrients are transported from deep waters, we look at their vertical structure, which is comprised of three zones. First, we have the epilimnion or surface water. Next, we have the hypolimnion or deep water. Lastly, we have the transition between the two, which is the thermocline. Even if turbulence occurs, mixing of waters do not happen because of the thermocline. But there are instances wherein there is what we call a turnover, where nutrients are brought up from the bottom to surface waters. Thus, we can conclude that the annual cycle of productivity is a direct result of both thermocline dynamics and consequent behavior of the vertical distribution of nutrients. Inputs from dead organic matter from adjacent terrestrial ecosystems, rainwater, and subsurface seepage brings nutrients into streams. This continuous directional movement of water affects nutrient cycling in stream ecosystems. How quickly these are carried depends on how fast the water moves, as well as physical and biological factors. Jack Webster pictures this movement as a spiral rather than a circle, and he calls this nutrient spiraling. Spiraling is measured as the distance needed to complete one nutrient cycle. It is said that the longer the distance required, the more open the spiral is. Meanwhile, the shorter the distance, the tighter the spiral. Organisms can function to both open and tighten the spiral. Organisms that shred and fragment organic matter can open spirally, facilitating the transport of organic materials downstream, while others tighten by physically strong dead matter.
Coastal ecosystems are areas where land and water meet to create an environment with distinct diversity and energy flow. Estuaries are partially enclosed water bodies where fresh water from rivers mixes with ocean salt water. The velocity of the current drops, and the sediments are deposited within a short distance as the fresh water from river meets with salt water, forming a sediment trap. The buildup of these sediment traps creates mud flats and salt marshes over time. As previously said, estuaries have a distinct energy flow, and its nutrient cycling can be compared to the cycling process of terrestrial, open water, and stream ecosystems. Similar to terrestrial ecosystems, the dominant plants are rooted in sediments and functions as a link between where decomposition and primary production occurs. Also, the horizontal flow of water transports organic matter both into and out of the ecosystem, just like in rivers and streams. Distribution of nutrients also occurs in coastal ecosystem with distinct variations. The rise and fall in the tidal cycle to remove salts and other toxins from the marshes to bring in the nutrients from the coastal waters occurs through a process called tidal subsidy. It is also important in distributing oxygen to oxygen-depleting waters in the surface water. Salt marshes have sediments with low oxygen content that favors anaerobic bacteria. They carry out metabolic processes through anaerobic respiration or fermentation that involves the use of inorganic compounds instead of oxygen. Its net primary production is consumed mainly by bacteria and fungi. Each salt marsh differs in the way carbon and other nutrients move through the food web, as well as how these nutrients are transported. Some are dependent on tidal exchanges. Some nutrients are exported to the estuary as mineral nutrients or physically as a detritus, bacteria, or any other organisms within the food web. Primary production is mostly integrated by internal nutrient cycling than external factors. The nutrient cycling involves decomposition and mineralization within the sediment as well as the excretion of zooplanktons. In tidal marshes, the layers of freshwater flow and counterflow of the brackish, heavier water are physically separated by water density variations caused by differences in salt concentration and water temperature. Living and dead organisms settle in pycnocline, which is the zone of maximum vertical difference in density. These organisms conserve their nutrient contents by the countercurrent flow. Aside from transferring heat from the tropics to polar regions, ocean surface currents also influences productivity and nutrient cycling in an ecosystem. These changes is due to the Coriolis effect, which drives the ocean current as well as weather patterns. Water movement can also bring the vertical movement of water, causing upwelling. In the western side of the globe, the surface currents flows along the coastline and toward equator. At the same time, these surface waters are pushed by the Coriolis effect. These result in deeper and more nutrient-rich waters upwelling. Another way wherein the surface currents are deflected to the right north of the equator and south left of the equator also causes the subsurface of the water to be transported vertically. This brings cold and nutrient-rich waters to the surface. These regions of water are highly productive, and this is where the fisheries are mostly located. In nature, terrestrial, freshwater, and marine systems are all connected by organisms and fluxes of nutrient flows. Differences between these ecosystems allow the support of species populations living on their habitat. Some aquatic and terrestrial ecologists mainly study this ecosystem in separation. A more comprehensive understanding of the ecological patterns in trophic interactions requires conservation and management, as these ecological patterns between environments can be an important sentinels of environmental changes.